Imagine trying to build a society where the borders aren't lines on a map, but are literally drawn in sand and then erased by the wind. Well, one group did just that, thriving by following the clouds. Today, we're diving into the story of the Rgaybat, a nomadic people who went from saints to warriors to become the absolute masters of a huge stretch of the Sahara. So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at their poetic origins as the sons of the clouds. Then, we'll track their incredible shift into a major military power. After that, we'll get into the unique social rules they invented to survive out there. And finally, we'll see how their entire world came crashing down with the arrival of a totally new kind of war. So, get this. The Rgaybat call themselves the Sons of the Clouds. And that's not just some cool poetic name, it's a literal job description. Their whole world, their movements, their wealth, their very survival, it was all dictated by where the next unpredictable, life-giving rain cloud would appear. To be a son of the cloud meant your life was a constant chase for water falling from the sky. And what a chase it was. To put that into perspective, their homeland gets less than 50 millimeters of rain a year. That's under 2 inches of rain for the entire year. We're talking about a landscape of extreme, almost unbelievable dryness. Out here, survival isn't just a skill, it is a genuine art form. All right, so who were these people who managed to master one of the harshest environments on Earth? Let's dive into their origins and the powerful ideas that really forged who they were. The whole story really kicks off in the early 16th century, and it starts not with a warrior, but with a holy man named Sid Ahmad Rgaybi. He wasn't a king or a general, he was a revered saint, and his wisdom and spiritual power are what drew the first Rgaybat families together around him. Now, the Rgaybat had an incredible weapon, but it wasn't a sword or a spear, it was an idea. They claimed to be Shorfa, direct descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, was this biologically true? Their rivals certainly didn't think so, and they argued about it all the time. But you know what? It almost didn't matter. Believing it gave the Rgaybat this immense psychological strength, this absolute conviction in their own destiny. For them, winning a battle wasn't just a military victory. It was divine proof that their sacred bloodline was real. And that conviction was about to become absolutely essential, because the Rgaybats were on the verge of a massive change. From a quiet group of religious followers to the most feared military force in the entire region. You can really see the two faces of the Rgaybat right here. They started out as Zwaya. These were the men of the book, scholars, who often had to live under the protection of stronger warrior tribes. But the brutal reality of the desert forced them to become something else, Akrab, noble warriors, men of the camel. They had to swap a life lived under the book for a life lived on the camel. At first, it was for survival, but eventually, it was for domination. This change didn't just happen overnight. It was a long, brutal education in the art of desert warfare. You can see their learning curve starting around 1796 with their first big fights. By the mid-1800s, they weren't students anymore, they were masters of war, and they were expanding. The real turning point, though, came in 1862, the Battle of Gorgwanefig. They made a smart alliance, crushed the powerful Kunta tribe, and took control of the key trade routes. By the end of the century, the job was done. They were the undisputed rulers of a vast borderless kingdom in the Western Sahara. Okay, so conquering all that land is one thing, but building a society that can actually thrive there, that's a whole other challenge. So how did the Rgaybat organize themselves to actually master this incredible place they now controlled? The foundation for everything, the bedrock of their whole world, was the Kabila, the tribe. And you've got to understand, this was way more than just a big extended family. It was a complex political machine built on bloodlines, smart alliances, and even absorbing other groups into their own. For a Rgaybat, the Kabila was their nation. And inside the tribe, they came up with these brilliant systems for making sure everyone survived. One of the most important was the miha. Okay, just picture it. A drought hits, or a raid, and your family's herd, your entire net worth, is wiped out. Well, with the miha, other families would just loan you animals. No strings attached, so you could get back on your feet. It's basically a form of social insurance, a genius way to build resilience when you live in a world full of risk. They also had a really smart legal tool for keeping the peace, the daya, or blood money. Think about it. In a society with no police force and no prisons, how do you stop a murder from turning into a revenge feud that lasts for generations? The daya was the answer. A price was paid to the victim's family. And the price for a premeditated killing was so astronomically high, it was a massive deterrent.
The whole system was designed to protect the one thing they could not afford to lose: unity within the tribe.
So what was the engine that powered this whole society? It was one animal, the camel. It was their SUV, their bank account, their grocery store, and their main battle tank, all rolled into one. You really can't understand the Rgaybat without understanding that the camel was the absolute cornerstone of their entire world. Every law, every custom, every military strategy revolved around this incredible animal. So for centuries, the Rgaybat played the game and mastered the rules of their world. But in the early 20th century, a new power showed up on the board, playing a completely different game and bringing the biggest threat they had ever faced. The French army pushed up from the south, the Spanish came in from the coast, and this was not just another tribal conflict. The Europeans brought machine guns, organized armies, and this completely alien concept of drawing lines on a map and calling them permanent borders. For a people whose entire identity was built on constant movement, this wasn't just a threat, it was an existential crisis. And this threat just ripped the tribe in two. On one side, you had the dissidents, the ones who fought a brutal guerrilla war to stay independent. On the other, you had the ralliés, those who chose to side with the French. And you can see why. For them, it was a practical move. They traded their submission for protection, for modern weapons, and for the chance to use French power to settle old scores with their rivals. The tribe was now at war with itself. And the French? They absolutely exploited this. Their official policy had a name, apprivoisement, which basically means taming. They deliberately gave weapons to the ralliés and encouraged them to go fight the dissidents. It was a classic divide-and-conquer strategy, and it worked perfectly. They turned Rgaybat against Rgaybat and bled the resistance dry from the inside out. And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from a French governor lays the whole strategy bare. He wrote, "A change in policy would be absurd, because it is not with our means alone that we can reduce by force the tribes between Mauritania and Morocco." In other words, he's flat out admitting we can't beat them with our own army. Our only path to victory is to get them to destroy each other for us. And the strategy was devastatingly effective. By 1934, it was over. Organized Rgaybat resistance was crushed. Their world, which was once this huge open space defined only by clouds and grass, was now sliced and diced by lines on a European map. The age of the great desert masters had ended. And all of this brings us to a fundamental question, one that echoes from their history right into our world today. In a world of nation-states and rigid borders, a world that demands you stay put, what happens to the sons of the clouds? What is the fate of a people whose very soul is the idea of motion?